Hello, everybody. Today we've got two recent stories to cover. First, Tim Scott is no longer a candidate for president next year. Meanwhile, Jill Stein is a candidate for president next year. First, Tim Scott, he's tapping out, and you can read all about it right here in this Politico article. And apparently, he did not really tell many of his own staffers. That seems odd and understandably frustrating. But what does this say about the state of the race? Well, some people are shocked by this. I think it was rather minimally unexpected. Scott has been polling above 0% in the GOP primary, usually getting about 2 to 4%. It's not completely nothing, but in a crowded field, and with Trump still dominating, I don't know what Scott's path forward was. He was in the third debate. I don't think he made any kind of a splash. I think the more surprising thing is that Asa Hutchinson is still in the race. Hutchinson's still hanging on after Mike Pence and Tim Scott. I assume his time is going to be up pretty soon, but maybe he is banking on polling at 2 or 3% now that Pence and Scott are out of it. But as for Scott, he must have realized he was at the end of the road with funding, endorsements, and any kind of a strategy to go toe-to-toe with Trump or seriously compete for second place. So I don't think there's really any shame at going out at this point, and I don't really think this changes the race much. I would say in South Carolina, now Scott is not going to pull any votes away from Nikki Haley, but all the competition is still pretty much for second and third place. It's DeSantis, Haley, Ramaswamy, and then you've got Chris Christie, that's the main anti-Trump candidate that was actually on the stage last time. And I also don't want to completely forget you have Doug Burgum. He's still hanging on in the background. I'm sure he's going to have to drop pretty soon. But as for Tim Scott, I would say he's at least in the conversation to be a running mate for Trump, because Scott is going to be close enough to the establishment, and I would say he's highly inoffensive during speeches and interviews. He does just kind of come off as a sincere, nice guy. He's not really what the voters are looking for, but he's had success in South Carolina as U.S. Senator. He could technically run for re-election next time if he doesn't wind up in another position. But this is the end of the line for Scott. We'll see if he's going to make an endorsement, but Scott is the kind of guy you'd really have a hard time being mad at. You might disagree with his policies, but on a personal level, he is one of the more genial people out there. So that is Tim Scott. We'll see what he does next, but let's move on to the other story. That is Jill Stein. Remember her? Well, she's running again for the Green Party nomination in 2024. Some Democrats put the blame squarely on her for Hillary Clinton's loss in 2016. That's going to be highly up for debate, but there's also going to be a lot of cope in that. Just like with libertarian candidates and Republicans, I'm sure she did take away some from Hillary Clinton, but I do think she turned out some low propensity and disaffected voters, and if she wasn't on the ballot, a lot of them just would have stayed home. But I did not expect Stein to run again after an 8-year gap. She's going to have to first win the nomination, and there's a lot of candidates potentially in this race. We have to see what the libertarians are going to do, but if you're looking for somebody more to the left of Joe Biden, and I hear a lot of people are, we already had Marianne Williamson. She's running in this current Democratic primary, and we had Cornel West, who's now running as an independent, and now we have Jill Stein. That seems like a lot of progressive vote that right now would be split between those three candidates and three different party affiliations. Now, I don't want to lump all three of them together. I'm sure they do have some differences, but when speaking generally, those three would be considered progressive, and that's for the slice of voters out there that are thinking Biden is way too much of an incremental centrist. He's too cozy to the corporations, and he caved in on a lot of his promises. I don't know how many of those voters are out there, but I do think there's a good amount. Again, I think a lot of them would be willing to stay home, and they're not just going to easily go to Joe Biden if those other candidates were not on the ballot. That's something I think the establishment has a hard time grasping. I know they want to make it more about being anti-Trump, so therefore you have to vote for Biden, but I think Williamson, Stein, and West, they don't like Trump at all, but that's not the whole identity of their campaign. They're putting out a platform that you want to vote for, and it just so happens that platform is going to be a couple of steps to the left of Biden, and they don't care what the establishment thinks. It's always going to be unknown if there's a spoiler candidate out there, and I don't think the concept of a spoiler is a completely worthless topic. I think if you have so many candidates in the race, name recognition and media portrayal are significant factors, and I think with a lot of candidates it could be more complicated, and the winner might not necessarily be who everybody wants. That might be a good argument for ranked choice voting, but I think the establishments on both sides, their answer is to either ignore them, say they're not serious candidates, or come up with some type of smears. And I think both sides do not want to see these candidates get on the ballot in every state, and I don't think they want to see them on the debate stage. Republicans Republicans don't want to see libertarians on the ballot. Probably the same now with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Democrats are going to say the same about Cornel West and the Green Party. The political duopoly and corporate establishment media, I think their power and influence is immeasurable. And a lot of voters think it could only be the Democrat or the Republican that wins. And right now that seems like it's true, but is that really an argument to completely shut out other voices and other parties from the conversation? That does not seem like democracy to me. I'm not saying I have all the answers to the right system, but I am saying Jill Stein getting into this race does make it a little bit more complicated for Joe Biden. Maybe she doesn't win the nomination, but even if she doesn't, there's presumably going to be another Green Party nominee. I know their ballot access is not the greatest, but I'm not sure how far all these candidates are going to go. Williamson is still in the race. Cornel West is still in it. Are all of these people, plus Kennedy, plus potentially no labels, are they all actually going to be around in a few months as we start heading through the primaries? I don't know, but I am expecting the unexpected when it comes to politics. We're less than a year out from Election Day, but even 6 months in politics is an extremely long time. The news today might easily not matter in a couple of weeks, and if Biden's polls are down right now and he's nervous about these other candidates, he is in office. He can make some changes. Things could turn around, and his polling could go up dramatically over the next 6 to 12 months. Who knows what could happen? So we'll have to see how Stein does in the polling. I would expect it to not be very much. Plus, we'll see if she gets any endorsements or some solid fundraising. And I'm going to leave it there for now, so let me know in the comments. What do you think about Tim Scott dropping out? Do you think he could potentially be the VP for Trump? And who's the nicer guy? Is it Tim Scott or is it Doug Burgum? And what do you think about Jill Stein? How much of a threat does she pose to Joe Biden? And what about the progressive vote potentially being split between her, Williamson, and West? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.